All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're breaking down one of the most dramatic and pivotal chapters in the entire Bible, Matthew 27. We're going to trace the final intense hours of Jesus' life, from his execution all the way to his burial, really digging into the events as they're recorded in the text.
So the story kicks off with Jesus being led away to be crucified, and their destination is this place with a really grim and unforgettable name, Golgotha. The text tells us this literally means the place of the skull. Right away you can feel the somber, heavy tone being set for everything that's about to unfold.
Now, as they're making their way to Golgotha, the soldiers grab a man out of the crowd. His name is Simon of Cyrene, and they force him to carry the cross. This little detail is pretty significant. It shows you just how physically spent Jesus must have been, and it reminds us that this wasn't some quiet event. It was a public spectacle meant to be a brutal warning to everyone.
Okay, so once they arrive at Golgotha, things happen with this chilling, almost procedural coldness. He's offered wine mixed with gall, which was likely a kind of crude painkiller, but he refuses it. Then he's crucified. The soldiers gamble for his clothes, casting lots to see who gets what. And after all that, they just sit down and keep watch. The way the text lays it out is just so stark and matter-of-fact.
Now here's a really key detail. Above his head, they place the official written charge for everyone to read, and it says, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." You have to understand, this wasn't just a random taunt. This was the formal, legal accusation against him. It framed his entire ministry as an act of political rebellion against the Roman Empire.
And he wasn't up there alone. The text is very specific. He was put between two other condemned men, who are identified as rebels. So picture the scene, a central cross with two others on either side. It's this powerful display of Roman authority for all to see.
So as if the physical agony wasn't enough, then comes the psychological assault. This whole public event turns into an opportunity for people to mock him, and it comes from pretty much every direction.
The first wave of insults comes from just random passersby. They take his earlier teachings about the temple and twist them into this sarcastic challenge. They're basically saying, if you're so powerful, if you're really the Son of God, then prove it. Save yourself right now.
And then things escalate. This time, the mockery comes directly from the top, from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, the elders, the religious establishment. They point out what they see as the ultimate irony. A man who saved others can't seem to save himself. And their challenge is so explicit. Come down off that cross, and then we'll believe you.
It just becomes this overwhelming barrage. The leaders start questioning his faith in God. And then, in this final, brutal twist, even the two rebels being crucified right alongside him join in on the insults. The mockery is literally coming from every single side.
Okay, and right here, the whole story takes a sharp turn. The tone completely shifts from this very human cruelty to something that feels cosmic. It all starts when this strange, unnatural darkness falls over the land. And listen, we're not talking about a quick eclipse here. The text says for 3 solid hours, from noon until 3 in the afternoon, the entire land is plunged into darkness. Just imagine that eerie, heavy silence, setting the stage for what's about to happen.
At 3 o'clock, the silence is broken. Jesus cries out in Aramaic, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani." And the author knows his audience might not understand, so he immediately gives the translation, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It's this incredibly raw and agonizing quote straight from the psalm.
Well, you can imagine the confusion down below. Some people hear Eli and they actually think he's calling for the prophet Elijah. It causes a bit of a commotion. One person runs and offers him wine vinegar on a sponge, while others are saying, "Hey, leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him."
After that moment of confusion, it's actually pretty simple. The text just says that Jesus cried out one more time, again in a loud voice, and then he died. The language is so direct, so final. He gave up his spirit. But his death isn't the end of the scene, not by a long shot. The second he dies, the narrative just explodes with this series of extraordinary, chaotic events that are described as happening in that exact moment.
It's just one thing after another. Boom! The massive, thick curtain in the temple, torn in two from top to bottom. Boom! An earthquake hits, so powerful that rocks start to split. And then, the most astonishing claim of all, tombs were broken open, and the text says the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. It's pure chaos.
So all of this, the earthquake, the darkness, everything, it has a huge impact on the Roman soldiers overseeing the execution. The centurion and his guards are terrified, and their fear leads them to this unbelievable confession. It's they who say, surely he was the Son of God.
But the Roman soldiers weren't the only ones who saw what happened. The narrative makes a point to shift our focus to a group of people watching from a distance. It was the women who had followed him all the way from Galilee, his most loyal supporters. While others had fled, they stayed, and they bore witness to the very end.
Now, as evening starts to set in, the whole mood shifts again. The public horror of the crucifixion gives way to the quiet, private, and respectful act of burial. And a new person we haven't heard from before steps out of the shadows to take charge.
And this is where a man named Joseph of Arimathea comes in. He's described as a wealthy disciple, and he does something incredibly brave. He goes directly to Pilate, the Roman governor, and asks for the body. Pilate agrees. Joseph then takes the body, wraps it carefully in clean linen, and places it in his own new tomb, a tomb carved out of rock. Then he seals it by rolling a huge stone in front of the entrance.
But the story doesn't end there with the sealed tomb. The very next day, the chief priests and Pharisees, the same leaders who had mocked him, they go back to Pilate. They're driven by a very specific fear, and they want to take one last precaution. They basically say, "Sir, we remember that while he was alive, that deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' So you need to make the tomb secure. What if his disciples come and steal the body and tell everyone he's been raised from the dead? That last deception will be even worse than the first." So Pilate tells them, "Take a guard, make the tomb as secure as you know how." And they go all out. They don't just post a guard, they put an official Roman seal on the stone. Breaking that seal would be a serious crime, and they post the guard to stand watch. They're taking no chances.
And that's where the chapter leaves us, with this scene of absolute total finality. You've got a body in a rock-hewn tomb. It's sealed by a massive stone. The stone has an official Roman seal on it, and it's being protected by an armed professional guard. Everything humanly possible has been done to ensure this story is well and truly over. Which of course leaves us with the ultimate question. A sealed tomb, an official guard, what could possibly happen next?